Hey everybody, welcome to our webinar today. Thank you so much for joining. It's great to see so many people in the attendee list. So just wanted to welcome you and introduce myself for those who don't know me. I'm a partner at Blue Summit. I focus in financial planning and sustainability of your investments. So our main goal is to align your investments with your values. And so today's webinar is to elaborate on that in some of the ways that we create impact with your investments. So I just want to talk a little bit about the structure of today's webinar. We're having this as a bit of a fireside chat type of setup. So we're not going to have a big slide deck. We're going to focus more on the conversation with Judy and I and Andy. And I want to go over a few house rules. First of all, so we have a Q&A section that you can, if you go to the bottom of your screen, you can click the Q&A button and that'll allow you to submit questions. We have already received a lot of questions during people's RSVPs. So we're going to try our very best to get to all of those today. For those that we can't, we will reach out to you directly and address your questions. You also don't have the ability to see the full house that we have, just to protect all of our clients' privacy. That's something that's very important to us. So you only see us three, but believe me, we've got a lot of people logged on, and it's great to have so much turnout. So we're going to talk for about 30 minutes and then maybe a little bit longer, and then we'll leave the floor open for questions and try our very best to answer everything that comes in. And now I'm going to lead into how we create impact with your investments. And after that, I'll pass it to Judy. So the main three ways that we create impact with your investments is we first, layer one, we screen out all negative investments, meaning offensive industries like tobacco, alcohol, fossil fuels is a huge one. So you can rest assured that none of your investments are exposed to that. So that's the first layer. The second layer is the funds that we do choose. Those mutual fund companies are very adamant in what's called ESG integration. So all the companies that they're analyzing, they'll rank them first financially to make sure they're financially sound, and secondly on their ESG scores. So that's environmental, social, and governance, meaning the internal governance of that company. So the higher that those companies rank on E, S, and G, the greater chance that they're going to be included in that mutual fund. So all the funds are doing that work, and we select the team. And the third thing, which is really the focal point of today's conversation, is called shareholder advocacy. And that whole concept is when you have people that own shares, like a mutual fund company, they can then go into the board meetings of these huge multinational corporations like Apple or Amazon or Google, and make their voices heard and push these companies to become better and more responsible corporate citizens. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Judy, who's got a few examples of that and can lead into As You Sow, because As You Sow, and Andy, their CEO, here with us today, that is the core focus of their work. They just focus on shareholder advocacy. So Judy, I'll pass it to you.
Judy, you're muted.
Yes, sorry about that. Well, I'm a little bit of a Luddite. Hi, everybody. I just want to say thank you to everybody for logging in. It's great to see that we have such a big crowd here. And I know it's a strange time, 4:45, on a Tuesday, but it seems to be a good time for people. And I don't want to spend too much time because I want to get to our star of the show today, Andy from As You Sow. But Andy comes from a great history with this organization that started back in 1992. And this marks 30 years for As You Sow, doesn't it, Andy? Yeah, I guess you're muted right now. And that's the year that I joined the social investment industry. So it just so happens that same year that I joined, and I've been in the investment industry for 30 years now, was the year As You Sow was founded. And a gentleman by the name of Conrad McCarran, I got to know him very well. before he founded As You Sow, was a Washington bureau chief for Chemical Week, and he was a journalist. He was also a writer for Bloomberg. So he was really passionate about environmental accountability, and he's author of a couple books about corporations. And so Andy came in, I think 2010, so it's been 13 years. So Andy's been leading the way and paving the path. And As You Sow used to be a tiny organization. Now they've got over 50 employees and more. It keeps going.
Only 40. We only have 40.
How many?
40.
Oh, you have 40. Okay. Well, I saw 50 on the website. So in any case, they just this last year have been quoted in USA Today, Reuters, Wall Street Journal, S&P Market, Barron's, Bloomberg, Yahoo Finance, LA Times, Time Magazine, Morningstar, Consumer Reports, NPR, Fortune, CNN, CNBC, New York Times, Fast Company, and Forbes. Isn't that right?
Yeah, we've been getting a lot of press attention. We've been focusing a lot of energy around that, and yeah, we get a lot of coverage.
Yeah. So they're a very legitimate organization. They are an NGO, completely nonprofit. And there's so many topics that they've worked on over the years, from fossil fuels, climate change, fracking, to CEO pay, gender equality, board diversity, to corporate political spending, consumer packaging, single-use plastics, technology, waste, planned obsolescence, on and on and on. You guys are, it's amazing what they do with the money that's donated to them. And I do know, and I'm aware that some of our own clients do donate to As You Sow. So I want to give a shout out to them as well. And I was maybe going to mention one topic really quick before I turn it all over to you, Andy, because I thought it was a nice example of how dedicated As You Sow is to something that touches so many of us. And that has to do with your research on chocolate. Well, I just happen to like chocolate. So I thought I'd tell these folks that you guys started about 10 years ago researching lead and cadmium in chocolate. And there's a lot of, stuff in chocolate that people don't really know about. And it contributes to health problems, mostly for young people and pregnant women. And so you've done a whole study, and you had a lawsuit, and you guys have settled that. And now you've got all the companies working together to figure out how to reduce lead and cadmium in chocolate. And this has been a 10-year project. You guys don't mess around. So that's just one small example. So that's your introduction, Andy.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, actually, I just came out of a meeting about chocolate, because tomorrow we are meeting with a representative of about 90% of the world's chocolate manufacturers, and we identified lead and cadmium in chocolate, I guess about 8 years ago, and started testing. We've tested hundreds and hundreds of chocolate bars, and then filed about 22 lawsuits that became a class, and we settled with basically the entire chocolate industry, and got them to fund a multi-year study to find out why there's lead and cadmium in chocolate. And our experts actually traveled the world. They got it together and came out with a over 400 page report that showed where it comes from. And so now that we know that, we have now come up with a plan of how we're going to address it. And tomorrow's meeting is going to be actually to set the new levels based on this change that we're going to be making to the manufacturing process. We believe the levels of lead can come down significantly over the next year and 2 years, and the levels of cadmium can come down. And so now we're trying to get them to agree to set new target levels. So it's this kind of work takes a lot of tenacity. It takes a lot of really engagement and relationship with the companies, because they need to see the advantage of doing this to their own bottom line, to their own as person, to their own people, in terms of their own incentives. So they all agree that this is something they have to deal with. And so that's how, but it does take time. That is for sure.
Yeah, and I think that just illustrates the dedication that and the long-term vision that As You Sow has with the topics that you take on.
Yeah. So we're just right now getting into really the heat of proxy season. So this year, As You Sow filed 100 resolutions, literally exactly 100. And can I say, last year it was 99. So I guess we exceeded our what we had last year. But now the proxy statements are out. People are getting ready to vote. And it's very exciting because on Thursday, we're actually going to be announcing a new platform for individual investors to vote. So if you own stock, and this is not mutual funds, if you own shares, 20 shares of Apple or 50 shares of IBM, and you get those proxy statements in your email, you'll be able to actually, by setting up on this platform, and As You Sow under our As You Vote policy, will vote in an ESG aligned way for all of your proxies going forward. And so anyway, we're just getting ready to launch that on Thursday, which is, it's really important because about 25% of every company are owned by individuals, and about 90% of them just don't vote. It's just complicated, it's cumbersome. There's either a lot of paper or just too many decisions to make on any given ballot. But we analyze every ballot, every board director, every auditor, every shareholder resolution, and we will be starting to vote for, on behalf of all these individuals. So we think that's going to be, hopefully change the dynamics, because when we get these high votes, when we get majority votes at companies on our resolutions, it means that the companies really have to take action. And if they don't, if they're seen as unresponsive, then the following year you can run what are called no confidence votes against the board. So the board did not do proper oversight, and that starts a process of actually changing out the board and putting in people on the board who actually care about justice and care about sustainability and can put a climate transition plan, can put a racial justice plan in place. So we're starting to move into that and escalate into that area. Last year, for instance, we had a 96% vote at Caterpillar and a 91% vote at Boeing. We had 10 majority votes, and 4 of those companies were unresponsive. And so we basically put forth new boards of directors for them. And once the companies saw we were going to be filing that, they became much more responsive and actually fired people off their board, added people to board, created senior vice presidents of sustainability, all kinds of maneuvering to not have that board slate run. So this is the way policies and power shift. And this is the way companies evolve. And the ones who are evolving toward justice and sustainability are the companies who will do better, who will thrive in the coming years. And there's a lot of companies who are just say, we're going to keep doing business as usual and in an extractive economy. There's a lot of oil companies and a lot of companies that refuse to shift. And they're the ones who will be winding down. And they're the ones who are getting, as Robbie said, the lower scores on ESG, environmental, social, and governance, and they will be underweighted or left off of mutual funds that you would be investing in. So the overall impact of this transition is you want to be putting your money toward companies with management teams who are evaluating risk using environmental, social, and governance frameworks, and who are shifting their policies and practices. And we've done a lot of research into this. We publish a lot of reports. We publish 10 reports. This year we'll be publishing 10 reports. Last year we published a new report that looked at the diversity of the workforce of 277 companies and compared it to their financial performance on 14 key financial metrics. So not only stock return, return on investment, all kinds of other things. And what we found is that the companies that had a more diverse workforce outperformed the ones that didn't. And that's a significant finding, so that when you start to decide where your money is going to go, the folks, the fiduciaries who are making those decisions are now using those metrics. And the companies are starting to shift their practices to become more diverse in order to match their competitors. So this is a whole flow of the whole economy is just shifting this way. And we see this, and it's really the implementation of a change in philosophy. In 2019, the Business Roundtable and the World Economic Forum came out with, they call a new purpose of a corporation. And that new purpose is, rather than being just about you do anything to make a buck, you have abuse your employees, have slavery in supply chain, you dump in the commons. There was a change, and it's called stakeholder capitalism. And what it's about is you take care of your employees, you take care of the communities where you operate, you respect your customers, you respect your supply chain, and that will lead you to more profits for your shareholders. That is a major shift in philosophy that the World Economic Forum compared to transition as big as the Industrial Revolution. And that's what we're in right now. We're in this moment in time where we're transitioning all of our energy systems. The internal combustion engine is becoming obsolete, and we're transitioning to renewables. We're transitioning into, in agriculture, we're transitioning into regenerative agriculture. Those are the Kellogg, General Mills. Those are companies that have made commitments to their entire supply chain based on shareholder resolutions that we brought to them back in 2017. So we're now seeing this transition start to really play out. So it's a really exciting and amazing moment in time where we're seeing this implementation. And because of it, we're also seeing opposition. We're seeing a wave of rhetoric that they call anti-ESG. So there's a whole group of people who are very regressive thinking people who see this transition, and they want to stay burning as much oil and coal as possible. They do not want to see justice happening, and so they are opposing it quite vehemently, and they're very well funded and very loud. So you probably might be, a lot of people in the audience might be hearing about anti-ESG, and it's a lot of political theater. It is a lot of noise, and it's been very well funded by the oil industry and by very far alt-right political forces. So that's kind of an opening, just setting the stage for a lot going on right now.
Yeah, and I think this is a really good time to to segue into how you guys in practice do what you do, how you bring up resolutions, what that process is like, so that our clients can understand where the rubber meets the road, and when you guys, how and you guys really get into boardrooms, and how that process goes with companies to affect change.
Sure. So do you want me to share a screen and show you, just sort of as I talk, take you through some of this stuff? Right now you're screen sharing, so I can't.
Let me stop that.
And so I can.
You should be able to share.
Okay, let me just call up a screen. Give me a split second here. So you should be looking at the As You Sow website. Can you all see that?
Yep. It's
and
up.
I might just mention to our audience that all of these reports that As You Sow compiles, they're available for free on the As You Sow website. It's amazing what you can download. I looked at their 381-page chocolate report. It's just incredible what you can learn if you're interested in the work that they're doing. It's fascinating, and they are the best anywhere of calling corporations out for their bullshit, excuse my language, but they're not afraid to do it. They're not afraid to do these studies and call these companies out, because that's what gets the attention of the boardroom.
So just an example. So this is one report that we do, and we're going to be updating it this year, is so we look at plastics. And so we publish these reports, and we also share the raw data, and you can go in there and you can mess around with the data. but you can see we're scoring each one of these companies on 35 different what are called key performance indicators. And I'll give you an example just so you kind of get your head around it. So looking at Kellogg, so Kellogg, what we're looking at is these are called pillars. So packaging design is one pillar, and you can see they get a B minus. Each one of these metrics, they're either going to get a yes or a no. And our researchers go in. So these are all the issues around packaging design and reusable packaging and packaging transparency and recycled content. This is what's called producer responsibility. Do they pay to recycle their plastics? Do they support recycling? So we look at all these different issues on each of these companies, and then we plot them out on a graph. And we can do a comparison, like if you want to see Kellogg versus General Mills versus, I don't know, Smucker. So we lay them out on the graph and we can say, well, look, Kellogg is outperforming General Mills on this one, and General Mills is outperforming Kellogg on this one. So when we sit down with the companies, we can actually say, why is it that they're doing better than you? So what I'm getting at is the core is the research. The core is developing these KPIs that really have meaning and have meaning to the company. Because when you establish the metrics to measure a company and then they adopt it as a company, what gets managed, what gets measured gets managed. Once they're using your framework to measure, then they're part of the system that you can actually impact. So this is just plastic, but as you see on the reports page, there's a similar data set on excessive CEO pay, on climate, on this is zero emissions, on all these different issues, on pesticides. So I'm not going to take you through all of them, but these are all the reports that we do. So we start with a report, and then we see which companies are leaders, which companies are laggards. We talk to the laggards and say, why aren't you doing as well as the leaders? And that gets them, because it's so specific. It's you scored a B minus, they scored a B plus. It's because of these two things they're doing. And here's the cost of doing them. It's not very expensive compared to the risk of doing nothing. So once we do that, we talk to the companies. Most of them agree. They say, you guys are like McKinsey for free. And last year we had 196 engagements meeting with the company, and 97 companies said, yes, let's go do it. Now, if they don't, the 99 who didn't, we then escalate by filing a shareholder resolution. So here's a listing under resolutions of the 100 resolutions we filed this year. And you can see they're on political spending, diversity, consumer packaging, climate change, racial justice, all these different issues. So for instance, Bank of America. So they did not agree with our terms. So we filed the resolution. The resolution is a 500-word document, cannot exceed 501 words, and you are thrown out. You file this resolution that is asking the company to disclose information or write a report. And this is the actual resolution. The company gets it and they put it on their proxy statement. Now, all the shareholders are going to vote on it. So today we got at Bank of America, all the shareholders voted, and we got a 28.5% vote. Now you need 25% to refile. So that's a good vote. We also get majority votes. As I mentioned, last year we had a 96% at Caterpillar, 91 at Boeing. We had 10 majority votes, which is a further escalation. So it's really an engagement, a relationship with the company, the research, and then stepping up through the levels of escalation. Because ultimately, when the companies listen to us, they are going to outperform. They are going to do better. And the people involved are going to get bonuses. They're going to do much better. So that's the main way we interact with companies. I'll pause there.
Yeah, I think, Andy, it's really great that you pointed out the spectrum of actions where it can start with an engagement, which that can be successful in itself, and it doesn't need to go to a vote, or you can put a resolution that goes to vote. And even if that gets a minority vote, it can still be considered a success because it keeps the issue in front of sharedholders. So
we just care about if the company changes their policy. We've had probably our biggest wins at 6% votes. Because you went, this is a really good idea. It's not they're all non-binding. So the company doesn't have to do it, even if you get a 99% vote. And so and that's a lot, but a lot of people don't understand. They think, oh, it's just a win-loss, and it's sort of like a political election. It doesn't, there are binding votes, like for boards of directors, where that is a binding vote, but the resolutions are not.
Then this is probably I'd imagine a question that a lot of attendees have right now is, how do you get them to follow through with these commitments and make it more binding if it's not technically binding?
So an example would be Starbucks. So we interacted with Starbucks. If you see a recycling bin in a Starbucks, it's because we asked them to do it. We put a resolution on the proxy, and we got a good vote. And the company, now their brand is associated with the fact that they don't have recycling. And they, they've got all this wood, and their logo is green, and it's part of their brand. And people were like, what? Starbucks doesn't recycle? And so it was so embarrassing to them that they went and they put recycling bins to every Starbucks. So then we got them to their cups. We got them to use recycled content and to make the cups recyclable. So that was all going quite well until it wasn't us. Another group put a tracker on a cup and threw it in the recycling bin, and it ended up in landfill. And that made front page news somewhere. And the company was so embarrassed that they called us up and said, what do we do? And they said, we said, we've been asking you to eliminate styrofoam at every store worldwide. How about if you agree to that, and we'll make a public announcement. And so they agreed to that, and that got them good press with their brand. So in a matter of a couple of years with Starbucks, they recycled, they changed their cups, and they eliminated styrofoam. And so again, it's the association with the brand. That's where the value is. Other companies, they just don't have that, like particularly energy companies. There's not a lot of bad things you could say, about an Exxon or a Chevron. Everybody assumes that they are just, massive polluters, and that they have no conscience about it. So it's like saying Darth Vader is a bad guy. Everybody's like, yeah. So you don't have that leverage with an oil company that you do with a consumer goods company, because people can choose. I don't want to buy those sneakers because they don't have a racial justice policy, but this other sneaker company has one. Apparel companies, these people use slavery in their supply chain. These people don't. I want to go with them. So it actually hits the bottom line pretty fast. And so it's the brand. It's really that's what's really a critically important factor.
Yeah. I had a question, and this was something that I'll put in now. It came in through people's registrations. A few people had this question, and it's how you guys can what actions can people really take to further this process along that they might not know about right now?
Sure. So any individual, I always say the first thing you can do is look in a mirror and see an empowered and powerful person, because you have got so much more power than you have any idea. When you go into work, you can look at your 401k plan, and you can say, what's in my 401k plan? And I'm going to take a split second to just show you a tool that we give you for free that you can, if you click here on invest your values right here. So you go into work and you look up a mutual fund that's in your, let's say you've got VTSAX is in your 401k plan. So you can look and you can say, well, what's inside of it? Because most people don't know what's inside a mutual fund. It's a basket of stocks. The prospectus only shows you the top 10 holdings. So with one click, you could see, oh, I own all these fossil fuel companies. I own all these coal companies. I own all these fossil fired utilities. I looking at my scorecard, and I want to see deforestation, and I own all these companies involved with palm oil, paper, pulp, rubber, timber, cattle, soy, all these banks who fund the destruction of the Amazon and Indonesian rainforest. You can really get a sense. A lot of people don't want to own the prison industrial complex because it's the manifestation of racist policy. It's like I do not want to own companies like CoreCivic, the largest private prison company in the world, but you do. And so you could go and you could say, well, let's go look at what's in my, let's go look at a 401k plan. So now we only have 42 401k plans here. So assuming you work at one of these companies, we will have the whole S&P 500 soon, but let's just say you work at Amazon. You could look and go, oh, wow, okay, so I'm even more deeply invested in deforestation and burning down the Amazon. But there is a sustainable fund. Now it's only 2.5% of the plan assets are in it because nobody knows about it. But this FTSE social index, look, it's getting B's and C's. It's not doing bad. And it outperformed the target date fund, the default option, by 5% last year. So you would be able to see that and go, oh, I want to make more money also. And so you could, you can look and you can see what's in your plan. And these are all the scores for all the target date funds. These are all the scores for all the other funds. And you could pick one. There's the one sustainable one. So first off, you could move your money within your 401k plan to something that's more sustainable. If they don't offer anything, which a lot of companies have nothing sustainable, you can talk to some of your peers and you can go talk to HR and say, there's nothing for me to invest in, and they're going to have to add something for you. If you show up with 2 people, if you show up with 100 people, they're going to do it. And so you can organize basically. And on that website I showed you, there's a help center, an action center, which has emails to send to your colleagues where you bank. You saw those banks that are funding deforestation. There are banks that are not. Where your credit card is. Everything you buy from, as I mentioned, you could buy shoes from a company that has slavery in their supply chain and one that is clean. So every decision that you make is sending a signal. And that is how you can really aggregate your power. I'm gonna pause there. So
Yeah, no, that's some great actions for people that have 401ks. I think it's all of our clients are already
working with Blue Summit. They've already
Right.
taken a lot of action because that's why they're with you, because they want their money to be used to define the sustainable and just future. That's why they chose you.
Exactly. And so I'm glad you mentioned the banks. I think that's something that's, outside of we don't, directly handle accounts like that. So if people are concerned about their bank, they can look into better options that are not having their money go and fund things that they wouldn't personally support. I had a
question
hop in, Judy?
that came in from one of our viewers, Andy, about CalPERS and the recent efforts to have them divest fossil fuels from their portfolio, and that the board decided not to support that. What can you tell us about what's the inside scoop on that?
So there's two ways of thinking about it. So divestment means you have given up on this company ever changing. And so you just don't want to own them because also you see there's a lot of financial risk involved. So CalPERS is a very strong engagement company. They're very large. There's $300 billion. And so when they vote their proxies, say on As You Sow resolutions, and if they're supporting our climate resolutions, that's a lot of votes that help us to express something to the board of directors. So if they were to divest all the fossil fuels, they would no longer be voting. They would no longer be engaging with the company. So it's a trade-off, and it's really very personal. A lot of people and a lot of foundations have said, these oil companies are never going to change. I don't want them in my portfolio. And so I'm going to sell them off. And that sends a message also. There's 40 trillion of assets under management that has signed a divestment pledge and is shifting away from fossil fuels. It tends to make the stock more volatile. It tends to bring in more hedge funds that are, more short-term holders. So it changes the dynamic of the company somewhat. So some people say you got to stay at the table and engage, and eventually, if you have to, you escalate and you take over the board. Well, we seated 3 people on the Exxon board in 2021. As You Sow ran a 6-person board slate. Engine One ran a 4-person board slate and won 3. One of theirs knocked one of ours off. But in any case, together we ended up with 5 new board members. And I got to tell you, as everybody was so excited, this is like the brave new world, it's a whole new thing. They didn't change the course of the company because there were 12 board seats and they didn't have 7. And since then, Exxon has added more board seats to dilute them even further. So Exxon continues to be determined to just suck every last drop out of the ground and burn it. And that is what they are committed to. They've made barely a little bit of made some indications that they're going to be doing something on climate, but there's no no precise climate transition plan. I mean, we think that they're so far behind the European companies. It's just who mostly have transitioned. I mean, a lot of companies, the Danish natural gas company is 100% offshore wind, and they are doing incredibly well. Repsol in Spain, Total in France. These companies have diversified their portfolio. They've become energy companies because it's cheaper to make a kilowatt of electricity with wind or solar than it is with fossil fuels. It's just pure economics that one would make this transition. But the US oil companies are not moving very fast. So do you divest? If CalPERS divested, it would send a very strong signal, and it would maybe have some impact on the share price. A study just came out because everybody says that divestment doesn't affect share price, and an academic study just came out recently that showed it actually does. So that argument is kind of in the world of academia after looking at it for 10 or 12 years, because we were involved with the divestment movement back in 2011. So it's been over, I guess, 11, 12 years now. So you can start to see some stuff. Anyway, so that kind of sums it up. I think they work together really well. That's why we were involved with the organizing and training organizers and putting them on college campuses, because it created all this energy of just this frustration of the students saying to their endowment, why is it that the mission of this school is to create a brighter future for your students, and yet you are condemning us to an unlivable planet? It's a very good argument. We're now working with student groups who went to their endowments. Their endowments said, we're not going to divest because we like those dividends. That's the bottom line. That's why people are holding on to their oil stock. Exxon, even though they were losing money for 12 years, they paid their dividends every single time. They borrowed money to pay dividends. It was a total Ponzi scheme, but it's what they do. So what the students said is, well, if we're going to have to hold them, let's engage. So the students got the university to start to authorize As You Sow to file on their behalf. And we started filing resolutions on behalf of Arizona State University, Warren Wilson College, a lot of these universities, as well as voting, using As You Vote, our voting platform, to vote for all of the equities that the colleges held. So that's what the students are doing. And now this group of students wants to spread to 20 more campuses. So there's a shareholder advocacy student-led movement that's happening. I'm on the steering committee, and it's just getting launched. We just are having our second meeting, I think, next week.
Andy, that's we got a comment from an attendee kind of tagging on to the CalPERS and fossil fuel question. And there's some recent news that there was a board decision from CalPERS to not support a state bill that would have barred CalPERS from investing in fossil fuels. Now, do you think it's the financial value, the dividend value of those fossil fuel stocks that would have caused them to do that, or what are your thoughts there?
Well, back in 2013 or 14, the California State Legislature passed a bill that said CalPERS must divest, and CalPERS said, "You're not the boss of us," and never did, because the legislature does not have say over CalPERS decisions. The CalPERS board does. And the CalPERS board said, look, for us to give up these dividends, we would be in breach of our fiduciary duty because we have got to provide our firefighters and all of our, California state workers with their pension money. And that's what we're going to do. So we've already been through this cycle.
Yeah. So they tie it to the finances and they say that it's too financially valuable to give up, even though, decades down the road,
they
could be
lost money for
completely
12 years. And right now they're in the middle of a bubble because of, a genocidal maniac who's Putin attacking Ukraine has caused oil prices to spike. The oil companies gouged the Americans at the pump, driving up inflation, record profits. And so that's going to crash. And it is just a bubble. But right now they're saying they've never missed a dividend payment ever. And even when they were losing money. So that's a tough call. I mean, personally, if CalPERS divested, it would send an incredible signal. It would ripple through the entire thing. I support them actually divesting, but they haven't been listening to me since I've been involved with them. That's been,
we'll keep trying.
And I've been trying to talk to them all the time. I know them well. But no, they have a structure to make these decisions. Their investment, they have 12 people on an investment committee that publicly meets and debates these things. And so now CalSTRS, we work with the state treasurer to get them to divest assault weapons. Now those are teachers, and that was after, I think, Sandy Hook. They came to us and said, does CalSTRS have assault weapons? And we did an analysis, using weapon-free funds that I showed you a minute ago. And we showed them all the assault weapon holdings that they had. And CalSTRS, the teachers, the pensioners said, we do not want to profit from these. And they sold those companies. After the Uvalde shootings in Texas, we did an analysis. The two teachers that were killed in that shooting, they each own 12 different weapons and ammunition manufacturers.
I think that's the type of information that when people hear that, it really connects the dots that people don't understand.
Teachers unions over and over again about the teachers unions across the nation should be, do you sleep well at night knowing that you personally are making money from the sale of assault weapons? And they just can't seem to do it. And same thing, but we talk to the nurses union and say fossil fuels are sending children to emergency rooms with asthma. We know that from coal-fired power, and they have not divested either. So there's a disconnect between the people who earn the money and the people who invest the money for them. Just like with the 401k plans. Every one of those companies I showed you, almost none of them have a sustainable option. And when we surveyed the people at the companies, the employees, 80% of them said, we want to invest sustainably. And so we filed resolutions at Amazon, Comcast, Microsoft, FedEx, and Campbell's saying, why is our 401k out of alignment with our sustainability goals? Amazon, buying 100,000 electric vehicles. So operationally, we are executing on this climate plan, but the money, they said, you cannot touch it. And we met with them and they said, we are not changing a thing. So we took it to a vote. We got a good vote. And Microsoft, we got even a better vote. The employees really organized. So we think there's going to be a shift. There's 100 million people with $10 trillion of assets that are invested in their own destruction. They are invested in retiring on an unlivable planet. And they're waking up to that fact. And they're waking up to the fact that they actually have the power to change it. They just have to ask, but they don't even know how to ask. So it's a lot of education that we're doing right now.
That's a great point. Now we're out of time. I am going to put one more question in because this is one that's coming from a few different people. So let's try to answer this one quickly. But what trends have you seen as far as from 10 years ago to now, how companies are receiving this type of feedback and these urges to change?
Last year, we had 10 majority votes, the year before 8, the year before 6, the year before 2. The previous 25 years, we had 1. So that's a pretty steep curve. So basically, first off, the companies are much more open to actually changing. As I mentioned, 196 engagements last year, 97 said, thank you, you guys are like McKinsey for free, let's go get it done. When we filed the 99 resolutions, 56 agreed to our terms. So about 20% of our engagements go to a vote. 80% the companies agree to our terms and get to work. That number is much higher than it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, it was just, I don't know the exact number, but much less than that. We were also filing fewer resolutions and we were getting much, much lower votes. So I think shareholder power, shareholder awareness has grown since I've been at As You Sow. And I think we've, take a little bit of credit. We've had a lot to do with that, promoting it, publishing proxy preview every year, publishing all our reports, keeping it in people's minds that they actually have this power. ICCR, the faith-based groups have gotten together, the nuns, the Unitarians, they are filing resolutions. I think this is a place, it's a theory of change that is actually really active. It's really working. And so I think that's why it's growing in prevalence. That's
fantastic. I think that's really encouraging for all of us, all three of us panelists and all the attendees to hear too, that, there's distraction is happening, it's increasing. These types of asks aren't just falling on deaf ears, and companies are understanding that they're truly corporate citizens and they need to, their brands need to represent values that the rest of the world is really coming around to in a big way. So why don't we wrap up on that note? I just want to say thank you, first of all, to Andy for being here and being present with us to present. I think it's just so great to talk to someone who's living in that world, talking to these huge companies and getting them to slowly change their tack. It's just so valuable for all of us to hear from you. And I also wanted to just address all the attendees. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. If you have other questions that we didn't get to today, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be happy to converse with you one-on-one. We can have a phone call. We can do it over email. I really enjoy getting more in depth on these topics for you guys and helping to connect your investments with your ethics. So by all means, don't hesitate to reach out to me. So
thank you for inviting me. I've always enjoyed you guys and all your clients, and just good to touch base. And thank you for your interest in this, and thank you for your continued support and also for the work that you do on behalf of your clients.
Thank you, Andy. We appreciate that. Judy, do you want to add anything at the end here?
I just want to thank Andy. I know you've gotten so much busier throughout these last few years, and we've had you in person at our holiday parties pre-COVID on numerous occasions. And so I think that's part of the reason we have had such a great turnout today, is people know you and love you. So thank you for giving your time today. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we'll be in person again for an event in the near future, although there's nothing planned, but I think we should work on that.
Sounds good.
Down here in person.
Sounds good. All right, you guys, thanks again. Everybody have a wonderful evening.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.